A massive blackout hit Puerto Rico on Wednesday, leaving all 1.4 million customers in the island without electricity. Member countries of the World Health Organization approved the first global treaty to address future pandemics. And on Wednesday night, Israeli strikes across northern Gaza killed another 22 Palestinians. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We'll begin with the news. Stay with us. A massive blackout hit Puerto Rico on Wednesday, leaving all 1.4 million customers on the island without power. According to an official statement issued by Luma Energy, the private company that provides power to the island, the outage began at about 12:40 p.m. local time after all generating plants were unexpectedly shut down, leaving the island without power as of 4:35 p.m. local time. Meanwhile, at least 78,000 clients are reportedly without power, with officials warning that power won't likely be fully restored for another 45 to 72 hours. It is not clear yet what caused the shutdown, which is the latest in a string of major blackouts on the island in recent years. And the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of America People's Trade Treaty has issued a communique to express its firm condemnation of the elections in Ecuador. The communique begins by stating that following the election of the President of the Republic of Ecuador last Sunday, April 13, 2025, the member countries of ALBA TCP closely follow with great concern the development of events, in particular the numerous irregularities that affect the outcome of the elections in Ecuador and the consequent allegations of fraud in this process, an unprecedented event in this country. The text also notes that the elections were held under a state of exception declared 24 hours before the elections, which was enforced precisely in the provinces where the Ecuadorian opposition has maintained historic popular support. The intimidating military presence at polling stations and polling centers was evident throughout the country. Some international observers declared feeling pressure by official authorities. It also emphasizes that international observers officially reported that the elections took place in conditions of inequity, with inappropriate use of state institutions and resources. Finally, the communique concludes by declaring that the events that took place are of such gravity that the ALBA expresses its strong condemnation before the peoples of the world and the international community regarding the events of the electoral process in Ecuador. And the former vice presidential candidate of Ecuador, Diogo Borja, of the Citizens' Revolution movement, denounced on Wednesday that immigration authorities tried to detain him and prevent him from leaving the country. The incident occurred when the leftist politician tried to enter Colombia with his wife for tourism during Holy Week. He also said that the immigration authorities at the Rumichaca bridge tried to detain him and even took his identity card from him without a court order, without any explanation, and with absolute arrogance. He also added that he considered this action a reprisal for defending a political project that has always believed in social justice, distribution of prosperity, sovereignty, and dignity. And in Panama, teachers and social movements protested nationwide Wednesday in defense of sovereignty and to denounce President José Raúl Mulino's sellout policies in favor of the United States government. The demonstrations continued with a national strike in rejection of U.S. interference in the Central American country, which violates sovereignty and national integrity. Soundtracks workers also protested in defense of Social Security and pensions, demanding the government to remove the bill that proposes to increase the retirement age by 3 years. They also asserted that thousands of workers will continue on the streets in defense of the Panama Canal, which Mulino's government intends to hand over to U.S. military forces. And on the other hand, the teachers' unions continued their demonstrations to urge the government to repeal Law 462, which intends to reform the Social Security Savings Fund. Law 462 consolidates the model of privatized individual accounts, a system that, according to studies by the International Labour Organization and the International Social Security Association, has failed in 3 decades. And Argentina's customs sector advances with the 48-hour national strike against the neoliberal measures of Javier Milei's government and their repercussion on the sector's wages. The strike has been extended for 48 hours in protest against the lack of salary agreements with the customs union, which has led to a 50% loss in purchasing power. The sector also denounced that since March 2024, they have not received any wage increase in the midst of the strict price control of wages enforced by the state. In a statement, the sole union of customs personnel of Argentina announced that this measure will be replicated on April 29th and the 30th with the objective of sustaining their plan of struggle. We now have a short break coming up, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on, you can also find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We're going to be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. Relatives of the victims of the Jet Set nightclub tragedy in the Dominican Republic sued the owner of the venue for involuntary manslaughter. The relatives informed they also filed a lawsuit against the Dominican government for ignoring the conditions of the nightclub structure. According to the Department of Civil Defense, 231 people died in or as a consequence of the tragedy, and around 180 were injured. And in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the housing movements have successfully the state and federal governments to work together to finance and subsidize construction of 30,000 units of social housing. Correspondent Brian Muir has more.
Over the last 35 years, Brazil's largest urban social movement, the União Nacional por Moradia Popular, or National Union for Popular Housing, has helped guarantee housing ownership for hundreds of thousands of poor families through self-managed construction projects, led by working-class women, like those building the Carolina apartment complex on São Paulo's Near East Side.
We, who live out on the periphery and work downtown, have to make huge sacrifices. When we start living closer to downtown through an opportunity like this, which we gained through a lot of struggle, we'll be able to get to work a lot earlier. We'll be closer to our jobs, and when we're at work, we'll be closer to our children's schools. This will open all kinds of opportunities for us.
The UNMP scored a major victory this month when, after 2 years of pressure tactics, the state government agreed to add a 600 million real subsidy to the construction of 30,000 low-income housing units that had received financing from the federal government, after the movement convinced it that São Paulo's higher costs compared to the rest of the country meant building would be impossible without more funding.
We held protests in the state housing ministry. We held a public hearing in the state parliament, where lawmakers summoned state government representatives to debate with us. We helped create a bill for new housing policies that was introduced in the state legislature. But most importantly, we convinced the state government that a social housing project for state residents is important for them, too.
Future residents receive training and work 1 day per week, painting, laying tiles, installing wiring, and doing other finishing work. Once they've moved in, they receive their ownership deeds after paying 5 years of monthly installments, which range from 80 to 360 reais, depending on income, with the rest subsidized by the government.
We do what is within our reach. It's a struggle. And this struggle never stops. Even though we may get our own apartment, we'll keep fighting so that other families can get their housing.
The new subsidy from São Paulo's state government means that hundreds of social housing projects that have been on hold for years will finally get underway. Brian Muir, teleSUR, São Paulo.
Member countries of the World Health Organization approved their first global treaty to address future pandemics. At least 190 countries voted in favor of the proposal that aims to improve coordination as well as a more equitable distribution of available resources. The agreement will be presented to the Health Plenary scheduled for May after 3 years of intense negotiations. The treaty is based on historical epidemiological evidence, which assures that the COVID-19 pandemic will not be the last. And Pope Francis hosted a group of doctors and staff from Rome's Gemelli Hospital in the Vatican and thanked them for their good work. During the 20-minute meeting, the pontiff expressed his gratitude to physicians and staff at Rome's Gemelli Hospital, along with members of his affiliated university and structures, where he received medical care for 38 days for a polymicrobial respiratory infection that resulted in a bilateral pneumonia. The Pope was released from the hospital under protected discharge on March 23rd, with his condition showing further slight respiratory mobility and voice-related improvements, as noted in briefs from the Holy See press office. And U.S. Senator Chris Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador to check on the status of Kilma Labreco, deported by mistake during the massive deportation operation ordered by the Trump administration. Van Hollen requested a meeting with the Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele to discuss Abrego's health condition and seek his return to the North American country. The official also emphasized that every day he is illegally imprisoned violates due process of law, which is why he will focus on his return. He also denounced the Trump administration's judicial contempt by maintaining the threat of illegal deportation of Latin American citizens. And China assures to the United States that it is not afraid of Trump's trade war after the White House imposed a tariff increase of 245%. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Lin Jian stressed that China has repeatedly declared its solemn position on the tariff issue. In this regard, Beijing took its measures to safeguard its legitimate rights, international fairness, and justice. Meanwhile, the official pointed out that the tariff and trade wars have no winner and China does not want to wage these wars. Therefore, it is not afraid of them. For his part, the Minister of Economy, Chen Liuyun, said that the imposition of high tariffs by the White House will exert pressure on foreign trade and Beijing's economy.
China's position has been very clear. There is no winner in a tariff war or a trade war. China does not want to fight, but it is not afraid to fight. If the U.S. really wants to resolve the issue through dialogue and negotiation, it should stop exerting extreme pressure, stop threatening and blackmailing, and talk to China on the basis of equality, respect, and mutual benefit.
We now have our second short break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. A final break, we'll be right back with more. Welcome back. A professor of the University of Bradford in the United Kingdom said Israel has dropped more than 70,000 tons of explosive on Gaza, an equivalent to almost 6 times the Hiroshima atomic bomb. In an interview to a British journal, Professor Paul Rogers cited a study carried out by the organization Scientists for Global Security and affirmed that the Israeli genocide in Gaza did not have any precedent since World War II. The expert also stressed that while the Zionist regime continues its brutal attacks and siege on Gaza, it is also waging an aggressive disinformation campaign on social media against the Palestinian cause. On the other hand, health authorities in Gaza confirmed that more than 51,000 Palestinians have been killed since the beginning of the Israeli aggression on October 7, 2023. On Wednesday night, Israeli strikes across northern Gaza killed another 22 Palestinians. Israeli occupation forces have taken over more than half of Gaza in a renewed genocidal campaign since unilaterally breaking the ceasefire. Amidst the ongoing attacks, Palestinians face an ongoing humanitarian crisis aggravated by Israel's blockade of humanitarian aid. Occupation forces have so far killed over 51,000 people and injured more than 116,000 since October 2023, mostly women and children, with thousands still missing under rubble. And on Wednesday, Poland recognizes Palestine as a state. Foreign Minister Radoslav Sikorski confirmed that Warsaw recognizes the state of Palestine and the rights of the Palestinian people, underlining his support for the end of the Israeli genocide in the Gaza Strip. In this regard, French President Emmanuel Macron announced that Paris plans to recognize the state of Palestine next June during an international conference in New York. Last year, Norway, Ireland, and Spain recognized Palestine as a state within the border established in 1967. For its part, the Israeli Foreign Ministry recalled its senior representatives in those countries for consultations. And hundreds of demonstrators marched in the city of Ramallah in the occupied West Bank on Wednesday to commemorate Palestinian Prisoners' Day and demand the release of the more than 10,000 detained by the Israeli regime. Protesters gathered in Manara Square, chanting slogans, waving Palestinian flags, and holding pictures of their relatives in Israeli prisons. Palestinian detainees have denounced for years the mistreatments and abuse they suffer at the hands of Israeli officials during captivity, which range from regular beatings to medical neglect and hunger. The Zionist regime has intensified its detention campaign since October 2023, capturing thousands of Palestinians, with children making up a significant portion of the figures, an act that is heavily condemned by Palestinian activists and human rights organizations.
We demand that all officials exert pressure to free our prisoners and empty the prisons. My son Ahmed was released about 2 months ago, after spending 20 months in captivity. His situation is difficult and tragic. He left prison very tired, and to this day we visit many doctors to treat him. We do not want to wait until they tell us that their brother, Fadi, was martyred in prison due to medical neglect and starvation.
In Mozambique, human rights organizations demand an investigation into the killing of at least 300 civilians during post-election violence in 2024. The organizations affirmed that the state's security forces repressed protesters after the October 9, 2024 elections that resulted in the victory of Daniel Chapo from the ruling Frelimo party. Social movements affirmed that the deaths were the result of government repression, which left more than 3,000 injured. In this regard, international human rights organizations requested an investigation into alleged human rights violations. And in Sudan, the armed group Rapid Support Forces announced the creation of a de facto government contrary to the current Sudanese state. 2 years into the war between the government and the terrorist group Rapid Support Forces established a parallel state with the objective of advancing control of the country. It also detailed that other armed movements, such as the Liberation of Sudan, joined the parallel administration. Since April 15, 2023, nearly 24,000 citizens were killed, while another 13 million were forced to flee their homes as a result of the conflict between government forces and irregular groups. And the Russian army took control of the town of Valentinovka in eastern Donbass. As reported on Wednesday by the Telegram channel Operation Z, Russian Spring War correspondents, in their offensive towards the bastion of Konstantinovka, they broke through the Ukrainian defense and seized the area. Their source cited to the west of the latter village, the Russian troops managed to capture a stronghold of the Ukrainian armed forces along a forest belt. Ukrainian military analysts admitted that the Russian army successfully stormed a Ukrainian stronghold west of Alexandropol, capturing a group of its soldiers. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on our social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thank you for watching.